Let's just jump right in. Today, we're taking a deep dive, a journey way beneath the surface of how human beings actually connect. When we think of a great communicator, we usually picture the final product, right? The commanding presence, that perfectly timed pause, the flawless delivery. But honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. True communication, the kind that literally shifts perspectives, changes minds, and forms these deep, lasting bonds, it isn't manufactured in the exact moment you open your mouth. It's actually built in the shadows, long, long before a single sentence is ever spoken. Have you ever noticed how some people can speak perfectly, yet somehow they say absolutely nothing at all? I mean, they've got the perfect tone, the confident hand gestures, the flawless eye contact, but a lot of people who really want to communicate better fall into this exact trap. They go chasing speech tricks, they obsess over delivery techniques, presentation hacks, the mere mechanics of the mouth. And sure, those things can definitely help, but they only solve the surface of the problem. If you have a genuinely weak idea, no amount of polish is ever going to change the fact that you're simply someone who speaks very well about very little. So maybe the real problem is that we're looking at the entirely wrong end of the process. Before you even start worrying about how words come out of your mouth, you really should be worrying about how ideas are being manufactured inside your head. The sheer weight of a good, solid idea will always outweigh the technique used to express it. So if surface polish isn't the answer, what is? Well, there are actually hidden fundamentals that build the kind of communication people actually pay attention to and genuinely value. And here's the real secret. Absolutely none of them start the moment you speak. Okay, let's dive into this. The first fundamental is gathering your raw material. This first step is all about building your repertoire. Think about those moments when someone brings up an entirely unexpected example, or they use a comparison literally nobody else would ever think to use, or they manage to explain this common problem from a completely non-obvious angle. What's actually happening there? Well, they're drawing from a wide, rich repertoire. And you don't build this just by hoarding random loose facts. You build it through real reading, by following people with truly interesting minds, and, maybe most importantly, by observing the world around you with genuine curiosity. This happens in completely everyday situations, sitting in traffic, waiting in line for coffee, or just during a totally random conversation. Repertoire is really about developing your own unique way of interpreting the world over time. That interpretation, that becomes the raw material for whatever idea you're eventually going to try to communicate. But having raw material is never quite enough on its own. So we move to fundamental number 2, the art of connection, where we actually start exploring those ideas. Now, this completely redefines creativity. Having a repertoire gives you the building blocks, right? But knowing how to work them creatively is what turns an ordinary idea into something that actually lands with your audience. Every single topic, without exception, has multiple possible angles. Creativity is the skill of choosing exactly which angle to show, of finding analogies that nobody else would even reach for. I know it sounds a little abstract, but it really isn't. Creativity works almost exactly like a giant collage. You absorb these completely different, disconnected pieces of the world, and you train yourself to make associations that don't seem obvious at first. You just keep doing this until you land on something that makes people stop in their tracks and go, wow, okay, that's actually a really good point. And this kind of creative synthesis, it automatically delivers authenticity. When you hit on a solution that's different from what everyone else keeps repeating, your communication just automatically feels original, even if the underlying topic is something we all talk about every single day. Which brings us to the third fundamental phase, articulation through active practice. This is the crucible. This is where your ideas finally have to leave the safety of your mind and be tested against harsh reality. Because, let's be honest, as long as an idea stays only in your head, it always feels way clearer and far more brilliant than it actually is. It is incredibly easy to convince yourself you understand a subject right up until the exact moment you're forced to put it into words. There are 2 practical paths to train this kind of articulation. The first is writing it down. Facing a blank page is super uncomfortable because writing just strips away all the crutches that speech offers. You can't rely on a facial expression or a hand gesture or your tone of voice to carry the meaning. It demands that the idea stand entirely on its own. The second path is what we call the cognitive lab, basically turning any form of public creation like teaching a topic or presenting it to peers into a live test. Every time you set out to communicate publicly, you take on the heavy responsibility of organizing that knowledge. It's almost impossible to explain a topic out loud and not notice in real time exactly where your understanding is still a bit shaky. The blank page exposes your gaps bluntly. And honestly, it's exactly that discomfort that forces you to truly master the subject. The truth is, complicating things is almost always just a mask for shallow understanding. It's no accident that one of the absolute best methods for learning is taking a complex subject and trying to explain it as if you were talking to a 10-year-old. That exercise strips away all the fancy jargon and forces you to genuinely simplify. And spoiler alert, genuine simplification is incredibly difficult. Chasing elegance through simplicity, making a deeply complex idea accessible to anyone without losing its underlying depth, that isn't some magical innate talent you're just born with. It's a daily, intentional practice. Now that we've got the fundamentals of building the idea down, we have to look at the emotional core of delivery. That's principle number 4, the power of intention and having absolute clarity. Before you even open your mouth, you need absolute clarity about what you're actually trying to achieve in that specific moment of speech. So the crucial point here is understanding your distinct goal. Are you telling a story? If so, your intention is immersion. You want the listener to feel like they're right inside that moment with you. Are you trying to explain something? Then your intention is instruction, which means you need clear examples, analogies, and a ton of context. Or is your goal to convince someone of a particular point of view? In that case, your intention shifts entirely to persuasion. Each of these distinct intentions demands a completely different style of communication. Speaking without clarity on your actual goal, that's almost always the reason why messaging comes out confused, aimless, and ultimately just fails to produce the effect you are going for. And this need for intention applies even to the simplest everyday situations, like just wanting someone to respond or engage with what you said. It's never enough to just throw out a vague question. You really need to give enough context so the other person feels like their opinion genuinely matters. You have to show them there's a real, tangible reason behind your invitation to respond. Basically, the more context and clear intention you build before you ask for something, the exponentially higher the value and quality of the response you're going to get back. It's a real game changer. Which leads us perfectly into the final and probably most subtle principle. Number 5, the weight of words and mastering your word choice. See, words are never just words. Every single word you choose automatically activates an entire network of associations in your listener's mind. This is what's known as a semantic field. No word triggers just one isolated memory. It always comes bundled with all these related emotions and past experiences. For example, if you use a lot of slang that's specific to a certain group, you are instantly activating a semantic field tied to that group in the listener's head, whether you actually meant to or not. Every word carries a heavy emotional charge. So as a communicator, you have to be deeply aware of the hidden tripwires you might be stepping on. And this brilliantly illustrates the point. Take the words house and home, for example. On paper, they are seemingly synonymous, right? But they carry completely different emotional weights. They absolutely do not activate the same feelings or memories. Words tied to sensitive topics carry automatic emotional charges, entirely regardless of the speaker's intent. True wisdom in communication means understanding exactly what emotions a given word is likely to trigger in your listener, and then carefully adjusting your vocabulary to match. There is simply no such thing as good communication without a profound, empathetic understanding of the audience receiving your message. So when we strip it all away, we realize this really profound truth about human connection. Quality communication never actually starts at the mouth. It starts far, far earlier. It's a deep act of preparation. It's built through the repertoire you gather in quiet, everyday moments. It's explored creatively through unexpected collages of ideas, and it is relentlessly tested in the harsh shadows of the blank page and the cognitive lab, long before it ever becomes a single spoken sentence. So the next time you find yourself preparing to share an idea, to convince a friend, or to command a room, I really want you to pause. Look past the surface polish. Look past the quick delivery hacks and the speech tricks. Look at the hidden architecture of your own thoughts and ask yourself one simple foundational question. Before you speak again, what are you actually trying to build?